So welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. Today on the show, we have the wonderful Stacey Northover, who has 25 years experience in both the UK and Australia in the housing sectors, and is currently the Executive General Manager at Believe Housing, overseeing the potential opportunities that arise from Australia's $100 million housing development pipeline that's been committed over the next 10 years. And for those who might not know, Believe Housing is one of South Australia's largest non-for-profit community housing providers, serving more than 4,800 tenants and 21,000 social and affordable homes. So welcome to the show. I hope those numbers are right.
2,100. I'd love 21,000.
Oh, did I? Sorry, 2,100. That's just my dyslexia kicking in. Well done for being on top of that. I do have 2,100 written here. I said the wrong words. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been really excited to have you. But before we go into the deep dive of the world of your career and the housing sector, I'd love to ask the question around, who is Stacey Northover? What do we need to know about your earliest context and to understand your purpose and mission that you're serving out today?
Okay. Well, thank you for the invitation of coming. It's a delight to be here. For me, I grew up in community housing. I've lived in community housing since I was a baby with my family in the UK. And so from a real early stage, kind of understood the benefits of having safe, secure home. The total taking for granted the shelter that brings, and then the opportunities that come from it by way of stable education, healthcare access, and community. We had a really lively community that we were able to sort of lean on each other at different points in our lives. So my purpose is for young children who were just like me, who grew up in community housing, to bring those young children for today into safe, secure homes and to give them the opportunities that I was afforded just by having that one piece of stable accommodation. I never had to worry about where I had to sleep at night. We had other worries because growing up in community housing in the UK, you had to be in some sort of need, much the same as what we are in today. But the ability to access housing was a bit easier back then in the 80s. And I think, it's always been in my core that I want to be here to serve others. I feel like the housing crisis that we're currently in, we should be in a position whereby everybody has the right to stable, secure housing, and kids shouldn't have to think about where they're going to sleep. I had my own bedroom. That was such a luxury. But we had other troubles in terms of, money. My dad had disabilities. So it didn't take away all of it. But to know that every day I went to school and I had a routine and I'd come home and sleep in my bed and I didn't have to, pack up and move somewhere else was just, I cannot tell you how much that grounded me to be able to focus on my schoolwork and gather my qualifications to then go out into the workplace and start to do a profession that basically was linked back to the opportunities that I had as a young child. So my core purpose is to ensure that as much as possible, the footprint that I leave in this world is around housing for all and housing as a basic human right.
I think what's really interesting about what you've just said then, and as you're talking, I'm thinking about it, this gratefulness, I guess, that's coming through from having your own bed, like it's, Maslow's hierarchy, right, which is the basic human needs is shelter and community. And I'm thinking about my experience and potentially a lot of people who are listening in, like that's almost an expectation, isn't it? Where you get your own bed and you get a roof over your head here. And so it just, there's this divide in the way I've been thinking about community housing, and you're coming from the point of I was lucky just to have that, and that's all I needed. Can you elaborate on your parents and your father and your mother and on their lives and how they managed because it seems like you've been brought up with great values and morals in the sense. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about them as well.
Yeah, so my dad has suffered with mobility issues, basically, which ended up in a position whereby he really struggled to work, and my mum became his carer and still is. I think with all of it, you know, yes, there was struggles of money and paying the bills, but our home was surrounded with love, and that costs nothing. And the values of who you are as an individual, they were never embarrassed by their position at all. And that's why I feel like I don't need to be. I'm okay to say that I grew up in social housing, and you know, it doesn't mean to say that you don't grow up without values and core respect for individuals and care and kindness, you know, helpfulness and that sense of community. And I will say, when you grow up in an environment like that, where you live in a community where you've got mixed tenure, mixed socioeconomic, actually you lean on each other. You don't feel afraid to ask for help. And sometimes I feel like we drive into our garages and we shut the door and we don't see anybody, and no one really knows what's going on. And I feel there's a much more closed perspective now. I think we're starting to open that a little bit more by way of, you know, understanding that well-being is connected to being interacting with people and what that brings, that social connection to
belonging, isn't it?
Each other. Yeah, for sure. And the strength of a community. In fact, from my experience, there's more of a community when you've lived in an environment when there isn't that competitive nature around who's got what and what the latest car is, or, you know, my house is bigger than your house. When that's all stripped back and you're all on an equal playing field, what you have is that human connection, the struggles of life being very similar to each other, and it being okay to say you need help. And so my home was filled with love. We had, you know, Christmases were always full. Food was my mum is a wonderful cook. So we always had like homemade food on the table. We would sit down every evening together. Like, there were some basic things that probably we don't do so much now, that were staple in my home. And every day I got up, I went to school. My mum would walk. I was trying to think the other day. She would walk us to school because she didn't drive. And so we would walk for 30 minutes. I want to say it's about 4K there and 4K home. So we would have to do that, whether it was raining or, you know, of which the UK does a lot of. Yeah. So we would often, you know, she would walk with us every morning, get us to school, and then walk home, and then walk back to collect us. Like, we were
she fit as a fiddle.
Oh, she really was. We were a close-knit family.
Yeah, great.
Like, we took care of one another. We were there for each other. And I think, you know, money is important, but it's not everything. Like, the value that I got from that was probably far greater than the dollars or pounds in the bank that we needed. Yeah.
What did the community look like? Because you said, I want to paint a picture of what that looked like and the way in which everyone communicated and worked together. Can you paint that picture for us?
Do you know what? If I think about growing up, and I can still see my house, I can still see that bedroom, and I went back a few years ago before we moved over because I just wanted to see, and all of a sudden that house looked so small. But yeah, as a child it was huge, you know, it was really big. We had, opposite where we lived, like this green space, and in comparison to Australia, really small, but for us it was huge. And we would all the parents, all the kids would come out in an evening, especially if it was summer. We'd have a few parties. New Year's Eve, we'd have parties out on the road, and it was like it's like a horseshoe across the road from me by way of houses, and they were all built by way of the council back in the day in the 80s, and then people could buy them or not. So you had that right to buy over there.
Yeah, okay.
And so some people did and some people didn't. But we would all come out and play together. We all knew each other. And if someone needed help by way of, taking care of the kids for whatever reason, you'd be able to do that. Like it was not even a question, it was a given.
Yeah.
Being inside of other people's homes was so normal. And everyone's home retrospectively, like they were really small. They are not like the homes we have over here. Gardens were really small as well because, it's the UK and the footprint of property is quite small over there. But we just had fun. Like we had fun. Like we would go out in a day. So 6 weeks school holiday would be in June and you'd all be out all day. Like you'd be out in the morning and you wouldn't come home until it was dark.
Yeah.
And you'd just be out playing together. There was no screens, no TVs. You were out of the house. So, in that sense, it was quite healthy in terms of, that connection to people and understanding how you play. Kids play, right? Like it doesn't matter what your background is. They just play.
So jumping into the world that you now work and play in, how come it's different now?
Well, I think...
Is it just merely the times, the like you said, the screens?
I think screens can have so much to do with what we do in every aspect, kids, adults, social media. It's a completely different environment. The notion of play, like my kids need constant entertainment, and once something's finished, what are we doing now, Mum?
Yeah, correct.
Right? So
or I'm hungry.
Yeah. So it's constant.
Yeah.
And we've given them that notion of instant gratification. Didn't really have that back then, I was out on my roller boots. And that was it for the whole day. And I was
roller boots,
happy.
roller skates.
Roller boots. But so I think certainly if I think about the industry that I work in now, in the UK, in the same as what we've got in Australia, we're in a housing crisis. The lack of investment by consecutive governments, regardless of what your colour is, is having an impact. And I think we see that more and more now, certainly over here, with those people, those key workers who can't find accommodation. We've got a homelessness service in our organisation, and they're seeing people who are working 2 or 3 jobs who can't get rental accommodation. That hasn't happened overnight. That has been 30 years of lack of investment into affordable housing and just the sheer numbers, the decline in numbers of affordable housing. So back when I was growing up, there was this huge drive to build homes, but the governments also recognised that they had to invest in that too, certainly in the UK.
Yeah.
I think we're just getting there now. With the Housing Australia Future Fund, and that's something that I'm just delighted about. But it's a 5-year commitment. We need a 25-year commitment, right? Like we need something that's far bigger and broader than an election cycle to make sure that all of us have a home. And let me be clear, anyone could find themselves in a homelessness situation. Like it doesn't just happen to a certain cohort or socioeconomic group of people. Yes, those lower earners or people on Centrelink are going to be more vulnerable into those situations. But, any one of us can find ourselves out of work, having some sort of health crisis, disability, and all of a sudden you're thrust into a world that you have no understanding of. Filling out forms and going through the system isn't easy. I see that, and that again just links back to my purpose. I'm here to educate people around, what I'm a taxpayer, I'm doing pretty okay. If you invest at the front end with our kids, you're going to get people who contribute to society in the long term. So
makes sense. Casting our vision back to the UK and your growing up, the housing crisis over there, or the housing situation over there, I should say, is much different here. I mean, just given the mere population. Yeah. We've got, I don't know how many. What's the housing? What's the difference? How many in the UK? It's hundreds of thousands versus Australia, which is...
Yeah, it's quite normal to have organisations in the UK that have 100,000 properties.
Yeah,
social
wow.
and
So there's just
affordable
one organisation.
One organisation, yeah. So I think we've got something like 15 that have that, and then lots of others that have between 1,000 and 60,000 homes. You know, that's really normal.
So we're talking in the millions
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
tens of millions in regards to how many community housing. So, it's actually probably very normal.
It's totally normal.
Yeah.
Blended communities. You don't know who has what type of property by way of their front door. Obviously, there are still the extremes in every aspect of, you know, wealthy people, but they're really good at building that opportunity to mix tenure, mix communities. You don't want to put people all together that have the same issues, because you're going to create a really unhealthy environment. So sustainable communities has to be the key.
Yep.
And the UK are really good at that. And I think we can definitely learn from them. I'm not saying they've got it all right. I think 100,000, it's certainly when I've spoken to some of the CEOs over there who do have 100,000 homes, they're really clear. It's quite difficult to understand what the needs are of your tenant. You know, you're really far removed when you've got that many people from the top to the front line.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that we need to go down that road, but there are definitely opportunities that I think the HAF will bring for social housing and community housing providers in Australia, not only by way of what they can deliver in sheer numbers in the community housing space, but equally to be financially strong and viable for the future. There does need to be some recognition around the fact that rents are set in a way that we can only charge a small amount of money for social rents, which is absolutely the right thing to do. But then we need some subsidy. We need something, and that's what the HAF will bring, so that we can financially sustain ourselves in the long term. You know, and for me, I'm just about to open in a few weeks a 37 property space that has 2 and 3 bedroom homes, which was an investment with the state government in partnership of $14 million.
Yeah, well,
like that doesn't just happen. We've got to continue to do those things that we can build more, provide more scale into South Australia in particular, and that availability and accessibility to housing.
Brilliant. And kudos to you and the team. Where's that at?
That's in Mansfield Park.
Oh, yeah, great.
It's amazing. We've got this beautiful, as we drive through into it, we've got this beautiful tree in the middle. So again, that sense of community.
Yeah.
There's a green space. So what we've created is this opportunity for, yes, people to live in the homes and have, you know, safe, secure housing, good, brand new quality homes, but also the opportunity to come together, and we will, you know, host events there with them so that they can connect. But that's really exciting for us.
So your passion in this space, I mean, you grew up in the world.
Yeah.
But you were a 15-year-old
Yeah.
at a time and doing some work experience that really ignited this passion.
Yeah.
Can you tell us where it all began from that point, and how your career sort of evolved to finding yourself now as Executive General Manager at Believe Housing?
It's mad, honestly. So 15, I had a tenancy officer, lovely tenancy officer who was helping my parents at the time. And so I'd see her come in and out. And my dad actually asked her, because I said, you know, it's work experience time, I think I'd quite like to go and do what she was doing. And you know, at the time, I think she had a company car, and I was like, wow, is that how you get a company car, right? Like, I want to be driving, I want to be out there. I don't want to, my mum didn't drive, so for me, I had to drive.
Yeah.
So Dad asked her, and sure enough, she was wonderful, and she brought me into Poole Council, that was at the time, and she arranged for me to do a really good cross-section of different departments within that service. And I had 2 weeks with her, and it just set me alight, right? I could really see the connection and the influence of what she had with her tenants, and that opportunity to help and serve. So she just reinforced for me exactly where I wanted to end up. And then I think I must have been about 19. So I was super focused. I was trying to, that was where I wanted to be. I wanted to get into that industry. So 19 years old, I applied for an admin role in a housing organisation, in an allocations team. And I just slowly chipped away at it. I didn't go to university. It wasn't really a conversation around me going.
Yeah.
I think I would have gone if I really wanted to, but I really wanted the practical hands-on experience. And I just worked my way up. Every time I took another step, I was like, I'm okay here. And I'll just be okay here. And then another opportunity would come up and I'd go for it. And I'd be like, I just want to stay here.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened all the way through, to the point now where I'm like, right, I have goals now. I want to do big things. But I just worked my way up I've done everything from filing all the way through. So I've done all the housing tasks and job roles to get to the point of where I am now.
That's why you're in the role right now.
And so it was always that as I sort of grew into each role, I recognised that the higher up I went, the bigger voice I could have around the table around lived experience. And so still super connected to tenants and what their needs are. I still spend some time with tenants now. I still need to understand what their wants and needs are and how that changes. But super clear that I'm there to represent them and future tenants. So yeah, that's kind of where it all came from, and I still love what I do now, right? Like 25 years on.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about from going from the filing, and I think it's like the football coach, right? The best football coaches are those who have walked in the shoes of the players, right? And therefore, the same sort of scenario with you. You're able to lead with purpose in this space because you've been there, you've done that, you've come both from living in it, but then also worked your way up through the ranks of the work that's in that space to now go, okay, cool. And I guess it's really exciting to hear that you're still connecting with the tenants and learning from them, because that's obviously going to be fundamental to success. But you were responsible for a $19 million budget, 10,000 properties. Yeah. Is there anything that you look back on that you go, actually, I really made a difference?
It's interesting because I love people. I'm very much a people person. And I think I did a real short, and out of all the career, I did a 2-year stint of a support worker. And I can still remember to this day every single person that I supported. And after 2 years and all their issues, I know I made a difference there, because there were practical things that I did by way of increasing their income and access to benefits and housing them and cleaning up their homes from years of collecting items. There was one guy who lived in his home, I want to say 50 years, I think it was, because he grew up there with his mum and then she died and he stayed there. And I worked with him until he passed. His whole house was a 3-bedroom house of just him in it with all these things from the war, and he was so out in rural Dorset. But I know that I worked and connected with these people, but I did so, I tried to remain, and I was professional, but I couldn't detach. Like it was too hard for me because I like to help people. And so that's probably when I recognised that I was probably better suited to the management piece, because I could do more with the opportunity that would bring, rather than just on the one-on-one basis. I love doing the one-on-one stuff, but that really has a footprint in my life that I'll never forget. Actually, I can remember every single client.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I'm just thinking as you're speaking there about all the different types, and you said you can remember everyone, right? So there's some stereotypes about people who live in the community housing and public housing.
For sure.
And, let's be very frank about it. There's the ideas that they're generally jobless, they're drug and alcohol addicts, and everything else that goes with the crime in those areas are high. And we've seen that here in South Australia. How do we go about breaking that stereotype? Like what what is it? Because what I'm hearing here is this. It's not just that. Yes, there are pockets, but it's not just that. I mean, we live in an area where there is community housing near us, right? And we both know what we're talking about. And there is every time I drive by, there's bins on the ground, there's rubbish everywhere, there's police out the front. How do you break away from that visual when that's all I see as an external?
Yeah, it is difficult. I'm not going to sit here and say it isn't. And I think we don't have very much social housing in South Australia, I don't think. And so those people who access those properties are truly vulnerable. Like, they've got complex needs. Whereas in the UK, it was so normal that you had a really good blended community. You had people who were working, who were accessing those properties. It wasn't just people who were had major vulnerabilities. Yeah. And let's be real, there are people who use drugs and drink alcohol or have mental health issues who own their own home. Yeah. You just don't see.
Yeah, correct.
Right. And so I think, you know, the home that I grew up in, my parents used to, well, and they still do, they still live in a community housing property. Yep. They take such great care of their home. It's their home. And it's that notion. These are people's homes. It's not just bricks. People make them homes. And so we will only ever see in the media and the press those extremes, right? Those situations that will need, police intervention or health professionals. All those stories of people who take great care of their homes, that's not news. That's not news for anyone to report on. So you don't hear about it. Whereas I know, I've seen the garden competitions. I've seen the art competitions that we run. We have incredibly talented tenants, and we have tenants who take such great care of their homes. They are their homes. They pour nothing but love into them. Yeah. We've just got to get better at telling those stories. And to a degree, things like this will absolutely help that. But we have to open our eyes up more to recognise that it's not about the postcode in which you live that determines your life chances and how the values that you bring and how you live your life. Anything can happen to any one of us. Yeah. Whether you're in social housing, affordable housing, you own your own home. You know, we're in a situation where people are significantly under mortgage stress after all the interest rate rises. Yeah. That's going to pop at some point, and we're going to start to see more challenges that come from that. So you're always going to get the extremes of any situation. I think as part of the community, I would challenge people to open their eyes and their hearts to a broader view and vision of human beings. And it's not just about the property and the home that they live in, because equally some of the homes, some of the people who live in the block that we're referring to, some of them have beautiful balconies and you can clearly see they take care of their homes. They might not want the noise or the police. Yeah. You know, why? They don't deserve that either. No. So I think we just need to show a bit more compassion to our fellow human being, and just open up a bit more to what the realities are. The media will only show us a really small cross-section of what shit will make news. It's not really news to report on a beautiful garden. Yeah. You know, so I feel like we're in a space now where we're starting to see people who do have two jobs and are still, living out of their cars and accessing showers, communal showers, just to try to make ends meet and keep their jobs. That's happening more and more to people. Yeah. It seems unfair, though, in a way that there's these people who are trying to keep jobs and work and make a better life for them that don't have community housing, and yet there are some other people who are abusing it. Yeah, I agree. And there'll always be people that abuse it. And I think it's, I certainly have had situations over my career where people have, and I use the laws that are in place to not have those people in our homes anymore. But that's a failure. Like, we should be able to give people second chances, give people tools, and hope that they take it. I can't force people to. I can't make them sometimes stop their behaviours. And if people are in crisis, then we have to deal with that through the appropriate channels. Doesn't mean to say we enjoy that at all. I think I would never see any of the evictions in my career.
So is there a second part to this though, in regards to Believe Housing? Believe is 2,100 homes. With another 37 to open soon, and then 4,800 tenants.
Yeah.
I'm just going to use round numbers. These, what I'm about to say, is by no way factual, right? It's just about. I'm trying to use examples.
Yeah.
Out of those 2,100 homes and those 4,800 tenants, let's just say that there's 100 bad eggs out of that. So there's 4,700 great people, 100 bad eggs that are doing the wrong thing. Is it within Believe's Housing's remit to help these people with their lives as well as the house that you provide, or is it is that another business that does that?
So we, as part of Anglicare, we have our community services department, so we link in certainly with them. That's the benefit of being a Believe Housing tenant. We have access to some of those other supports. We provide support as well. And I think sometimes people don't know really where to get the help. So we're seeing, certainly in some of our homes, hoarding and squalor becoming a real issue. And that's because of COVID lockdowns. We weren't able to do the inspections and check on people. And now what we're doing and we're seeing is the homes are not being taken care of because there could be a multitude of reasons in terms of mental health issues. And it isn't always easy to access those supports externally with third-party providers. So we will absolutely be there to help hold a hand and connect. But if that person doesn't open the door, that makes it really difficult, right? So we can do all we can to help and provide support. But if someone disengages, then we have to, again, use the tools that we have available. And that might not always be the outcome that we want, but we have to take those steps to make sure that the homes are taken care of, because it isn't, there are plenty of other people who will take care of those homes who are desperate for housing.
Yeah.
So it's not an easy juggle.
It's complex.
It's very complex.
Complex and complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in regards to breaking the cycle, I think if you said earlier in regards to the UK, it's very integrated, right, within the community and environment. You also said earlier you don't want people with the same type of downfalls or problems or issues or whatever, I can't remember the exact word that you used, to be in the same area, right, same environment, because that can cause a spiral effect. So in the case of this block that we're talking about, and there's a few of them around, there's suburbs around South Australia, it does seem to be like they are very much similar. There might be the odd person in there that is beautiful balcony and all the above, but it does seem to be, on the most part, that there's the similar type of people. And again, I am making a judgment call here that I don't actually know the people in there, but as you just drive by, and that is literally my only experience, driving by, and it's the potential eyesore of some of those balconies that you see, right? And then the eyesore of the people who are walking around, and the way the bins are just with trash on the ground and all. And so how do we get them integrated in the community like the UK have done or are doing?
Yeah, it is a good question, because there'll always be a section of people who don't want to integrate and a section of people who are quite happy living the way they're living, right? Like, our standards, it isn't for us to impart our standards on them to live like us. Yeah. Okay? So personal choice absolutely plays a part. And for them, they might be doing well in the world, right? Like, you don't know what their journey was. Yeah. And I think when I say we should have more compassion for people, I think it's compassion to not judge as well. Like, we don't need to judge them, or how they have, what the exterior looks like, or how they dress, or if their behavior starts to really impact on how you're living, then we should be having conversations with those individuals. But our standards should not be imparted on those people to live the way that we want them to live.
Yeah, I agree.
So I just, I just see that you don't know. Everyone's got a journey. Like my journey from community housing ended up in a great career and a great path, but I had road bumps along the way.
Yeah.
I was, I think it was 28. I had a husband that I left, and he became quite violent at the end. So I had a pretty great life, bought my own home, had a wonderful wedding the year before, or a couple of years before, and all of a sudden ended up in a situation that was totally out of the blue, where this guy was all of a sudden very violent towards me and threatening, and I literally had to pack my car up and drive to my parents. I had nowhere to live, so I was still paying a mortgage on a house I couldn't live in from a person that I was scared of. And again, that wraparound love that my parents gave me, they just let me be. They gave me the roof. I had a tiny little room, and I'd go to work every day, and work was my staple. Like I would just, nice routine every day, turn up. No one at work knew what was going on. No one knew because it was Christmas that had happened, so no one knew. And I literally stayed at my mum and dad's for about 5 months to get myself back on my feet, and start to work out who I was and what my life was going to be now, notwithstanding the fact that I had a house with this individual, which kept me tied to him for some years to come. I think it was a good 5 years before I was able to buy him out of the house.
Yeah, wow.
Because we bought the house just as the global financial crisis hit. So it was, you just don't know. Domestic violence does not discriminate against, and we see that all the time in South Australia, women dying every 5 days.
Yeah.
It can happen to anybody, and like I said, no one knew, no one would suspected, and no one knew until I felt ready to tell people that my relationship had failed, and I felt like a total failure. Like, not only was it terrifying, but then it was embarrassing and shameful. But I was sleeping essentially in my parents' spare room because I had nowhere else to go. So I just think you don't know people's journeys. Like, no one would know that of me.
Yeah.
Because it's not something I share or need to share, but it's you just don't know what people's paths are. And I think let's try and be compassionate as a human beings. And
well, I think it's actually a really important topic. If you don't mind diving into it a little bit, considering we're about to embark on the International Women's Day festival, I guess it was a one day. Now it seems to be spreading over the whole month of March, which is really exciting. Do you? Domestic violence is an issue, and I think in conversations that you and I have had in around homelessness and community housing, it's something that you see quite a bit of. Your experience with your previous husband, when did that all start, and how? Was it something that was early in, or it just sort of a switch and it turned on? And what was your thought process into how to get out?
It was no, it wasn't quick. It wasn't a long burn. I was with this person for, I want to say, 9 years, I think it was, and so we got married, had this huge wedding, like it was everything to everyone.
So, because you said you were married for a couple of years?
Yeah, it was only.
So you were 7 years together, and then
Yeah, and it was a lot. It was we had a pretty happy life. It was all pretty stable, albeit now when I look back, there was probably, we have terms like love bomb and, coercive controlling behaviour. There probably was a little bit of manipulation going on that, being so young, I think I was 19 when we met, didn't really have much life experience to know what I was experiencing. And then literally, I think it was, we moved into the house, and 12 months after, it was I think a 4-month period of some very scary stuff. And I can remember he tried to run me off the road. into a truck. And
what was there? Was there drugs involved? What brought all this?
I think so.
Okay.
I think there was. But it was just so out of the blue and so out of character that it was. I almost felt like, well, this is going to pass. You know, this isn't really going to carry on.
Almost making excuses.
It was
for
because it was just too big to comprehend. You know, we'd had this whole life of normal and then the last 4 months of just chaos, and I couldn't work out why or what had happened. And then even when I moved back home, I was still trying to work through, well, what had I done? Was this my fault? What did I do? Because that's what you do as a woman. Like, you try to, certainly for me, I think I tried to understand what was going on, not excuse it, but
make sense of it.
Yeah,
Right?
makes sense, right? Like, surely this will pass. And then when it didn't, I knew that I had to literally pack up my car and leave. And once that had been done, that was it. And fairly quickly after that, I'd made the decision that I wanted divorce. I wanted to completely detach myself from this person, albeit I couldn't from the house, which was another pay. But the situation of being connected to him by marriage, I could definitely take control of that.
Yeah.
And it was that gave me control back of me and power back for me. And so taking that step was a big step. But he would still do nice things. Like, it was weird. He'd send me bouquets of flowers to work, and it was so messed up. But this is the pattern of people who behave in abusive ways. You know, you can't understand it. And so, it was a troubling time. I think 5 months with my mum and dad gave me strength and support and love. And no questioning. They were brilliant at that. I got from them this opportunity to live with them again at 28 and reconnect with them and have all these wonderful memories. It was just, from such an awful situation, something really beautiful came from it. My mum would cook me dinner every night, so I was back to meals. It was wonderful. And they didn't question anything. And then I wanted to move out into my own place. And they supported me. They moved me in. They held my hand. They put up pictures. I had this beautiful apartment where I lived in Bournemouth. And they settled me in, and I started to live on my own for the first time. And it was scary, but I knew I had them. They had my back. They were absolutely solid. And then,
because worst case scenario, you go back and move back with them, yeah, which is a great position and very privileged position to be in.
For sure. But knowing that, again, comes back to that whole thing of being a child, right?
Yeah.
Safe, secure, stable accommodation, knowing that you've got someone there to catch you is incredibly powerful. So, freedom of choice is something never to be taken for granted.
No.
So I'm very passionate.
I think my choice to go out and start this business was off the very fact that what's the worst that can go wrong? I'll end up back in with my parents and having home cooked meals every single night, right?
Doesn't sound too
you
bad.
Put your ego aside, right? And you'd be able. I think for me, just back on the domestic violence, what's your advice to those who are listening in right now that might be going through something similar? I can't imagine what it would feel like.
I think it is just to take a small step for you, ask for help. It is really difficult to ask for help. My parents didn't know what was going on until that day I turned up on their doorstep. They couldn't believe what had happened.
Yeah.
So I was very good at putting on a picture and presenting a certain outward-looking life. They were blown away. And so I'm sure there are many women out there who paint the picture, go to work, and no one has any idea. But to take a step and seek support and help, and it doesn't have to be by, a family member, it could be someone completely independent. That's where you start to take back control of who you are. And there is a life after. I had my family, but even after that, you know, I met my husband now, and he's a wonderful man, and I've had 2 beautiful children. We've moved to the other side of the world. Like, life only gets better, but you've got to take some steps. And I'm never going to sit here and say that's easy, because it was really hard for me, and I'm sure it will be very hard for others.
How do you ask for help before it's too late?
It's hard. It's hard. I think the final straw for me was when he pulled a kitchen knife on me.
That's frightening.
It's scary. So it is hard. But you can do it. I think I can just say that. You can do it. You have to do it. And especially if you've got children, you have to do it.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate that in that situation I didn't have children with him, because I think it would have been a very different situation for me. But it is, you've got it in you. You've got the courage. Be courageous. You know, we do lots of work with both state and federal government to build homes now for women seeking refuge from family and domestic violence. And that's an area of passion for me that will grow as we move forward into the next 5 years. So I'm super connected to what this means, but I'm also looking to find the practical solutions, the opportunity for homes to remove yourself from that situation, to take yourself out and give yourself time to reestablish who you are, and then make choices and make decisions in your life as to where you want to go.
Yeah.
That's something that I'm working through. So we've got the Turning Point program as part of Anglicare SA, and super passionate about that. And hopefully, with the Commonwealth's help, we'll build some more homes over the next couple of years.
Yeah, because that would be the most difficult thing that keep people in the situation, is that where do I go? Where do I take my children? How do I put a roof over my head? Yeah. I'm reliant on, because the domestic violence could still be someone who's affluent and got a great, like it doesn't discriminate, right? It's not just to the low socioeconomic, it's all levels.
Anyone.
And you know, someone making 200, 300 grand a year could be causing domestic violence, which will lead the other person going, well, you know, I like this life of affluence
difficult.
and
it is difficult. I think equally in situations you have the physical violence, but you also have the coercive control, the financial control. I had some of that.
Yeah.
Which makes it then really hard to access the money and have your own bank account, you know, and be able to walk out the door and go and even, you know, stay in a hotel at your own expense. I think we need to just be better at, you know, giving women pathways to access safety and security. And in the Turning Point program, we do that for a 12-month period, because it's really difficult to get back on your feet, and you want your kids to go to school, and you want to get some normality back in before you then start to decide, okay, so what do I want to do and what do I need to do to get myself into a more permanent situation? And we've had some, you know, great stories of women who set up their businesses and have been incredibly successful. But you're absolutely right. It does not discriminate. You know, from the outside, I was working in a housing organisation who had nowhere to live. I had nowhere to live.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I was still turning up every day. I wasn't off sick. Like that was my routine, and that gave me routine to take one foot in front of the other every single day. And that's what you need to do, is one step in front of the other every day. And I think, you know, I would just say to women, I know it's hard. I know it's hard, but you're worth it.
Thank you for sharing that story. It's obviously it's prevalent in today's society, and it's a powerful topic. And, you know, thank you for sharing that and diving into those vulnerabilities.
Look, if it helps anyone, that's back to my purpose.
Agreed, right?
So,
yeah, and it's a tough topic to talk about because, like you said, you've never really walked in someone's shoes until you know what they're going through. Yeah. So, you mentioned your husband, Mark.
Yes.
And your 2 children, Charlie and Isla. Yeah. I have a daughter also named Isla. Only good people have kid's name's Isla. You decided in 2020, was it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
That-
a few years before
A few
that.
years before. So
Yeah.
a few years before you decided we're going to pick up and
Yeah.
move to Australia. Tell us that story, because I know this is an adventure in its own right.
This is madness in itself. So, Isla had been born, and I was about to go back to work after maternity leave. So it was 2017, and we decided that one day we wanted to retire in Australia. And I was like, no, forget retirement. Let's live life. Now's the time to do it. So. We started the journey to apply for our visas, which took some considerable time because it is a challenge to emigrate, and it is very costly as well. And so that's something to consider when we're trying to bring professional people into the country. It is a challenge. It's not easy by any means. So we did that. We started that process, and by 2019. Yeah, trying to work it all out. 2019, we got our visas. And so we put a house on the market. I quit my job, getting ready to move. And then COVID hit.
Yeah.
And the UK was particularly badly hit by it, just because of the sheer numbers of people. Social distancing over there is pretty much impossible.
Yeah.
And
it was the lack of belief by the prime minister at the time.
Yeah,
what was his name?
Boris Johnson.
Boris, yeah, he's still there, isn't he? Boris.
He's not in government at this point.
That's right. Yeah.
But never say never.
Yeah.
Boris is one of them. So
Some other countries with the same type of
Let's not go down that road.
Yeah.
I think so it was still new, right? No one really knew much about COVID-19. It was still a lot of fake news.
Yeah.
And information was coming out real slow, but
Drips and drabs.
It was really weird. I just remember by the March, I think it was March, April, we had this little heat wave, and all of a sudden we went into lockdown, and we all loved it. Like the notion around the country was, we get 2 weeks at home, a bit of time out. No one had to do anything socially. And it was just this weird time of taking a break out of life. Never did we expect that this would be the trajectory of the rest of that year. And so we sold our house. I quit my job. So I was at this point unemployed and had to move. And so we found somewhere else to move to temporarily. All whilst in the May I applied for a job in Anglicare, not just thinking it was going to be experience, see how I do an interview on the internet. Like, it was a bit of a novelty. It was a wonderful opportunity, and to think that I could come over here and do the same profession I had in the UK was just, it was too good an opportunity to miss. So went through that process, and they were fabulous. Like, I came off that call and I was like, we've got to go. We've just got to go. So long story short, we got to the point.
So you got the job.
I got the job. And then we had to...
couldn't start straight away.
Couldn't start straight away. There was this new thing of lockdowns and border closures, and we then needed to have our visa, but then we had to have an exemption to enter. I was like, this is so hard. And again, with the support of Anglicare SA, I was able to access that because I had a job to come to.
Yeah.
So we started the role of getting our tickets. So we had tickets booked twice over, and they were cancelled each time because of COVID.
Ouch.
Third time, we had tickets. We had packers in the house packing us up to do an international move. We had our exemption. We had tickets, and then we had a phone call, and this was the day before Christmas Eve. So we were flying at Christmas, and it was Singapore Air, and they said, you can come up here in 4 hours and get on a flight, or you're not going. Singapore are closing the entry for the UK flights because of variants of COVID. Can you do it? Do you want the ticket? And I went, yeah. I had no idea how we were going to get there because we were 2 hours out of London. The packers were still in the house. I had to find someone to take us to the airport. We were still in lockdown, and we had a car on the drive that we had to sell. So I had 2 hours to do it all. But my mantra with all of it has always been say yes and figure it out later, right? Like, and it worked.
But you didn't have later. You had
I
4 hours.
Just like 4 hours, I'll do it. So I went downstairs and I told the packers, and my husband sold his car at some We Buy Any Car, I think it was, a quick situation that we could just get rid of the car. I called the taxi who I'd booked for the following day and asked him to come the day before. Thankfully, he said he could. And we went to the airport, and it was exhausting. And I don't think it was when we were checking in and the guy was on the phone to someone in Australia to make sure that we could get on the plane. And when he gave us our boarding passes to go through, I just floored, because it was just so many obstacles along the way that I didn't believe it was going to happen until.
So literally the golden ticket.
Yeah. And he took the cases, and that was that. And so we were so lucky. We got on that plane. The plane was half empty, obviously. Last plane in, and we had to do 24 hours to stay in Singapore airport before we picked up the following flight the next day, because that one wasn't affected. And so we eventually arrived. I think it was Christmas Day we arrived in Adelaide. It was beautiful sun, and the only thing we saw was getting on the bus and the blue sky from the terminal building to the bus. And we got on this bus, and we were going to a Medi hotel.
Yeah.
To endure 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
In
quality.
one room with 2 kids. And by this point, I was okay with that, because I was like, I'm exhausted. I just need a break. I'm happy to not do anything. And we went and stayed.
Actually, would have given you time to
just
fix everything up back in the UK.
And find somewhere to live here.
Yeah,
you know,
it's true.
That was something we hadn't figured out.
Yeah, you didn't even have a house.
We had nowhere to live. So the hotel was actually a really good thing for us. And the first week I did lots of lovely painting, and the kids were good, and we just had this week together. And it was New Year's Eve, and it was fun, right? That second week was the toughest week of my life, whereas my husband was the complete opposite. The first week he struggled, and the next week he was like, we're nearly there.
Yeah.
So we were tag teaming in that way, but it was a small room, and you couldn't open the balcony door. So we literally had bricks to look at. We could have been anywhere in the world. You would not have known. It was the strangest.
No fresh air.
No fresh air. Tiny little opening, and I'd put my head out between 11:30 and 12 every day, just through this balcony, just to feel the warmth, because that was the only way to feel like you were somewhere.
A human.
Yeah, it was weird. Anyway, we survived. We all survived, and I although it was a tough experience, it was so worth it. Like, to be here, it was just so worth it. So we were fortunate enough to find an Airbnb for when we came out, and then we started the rat run of rentals like everybody else. Massive lines and all these people floating around. We were so green to all of it. And we were very fortunate in where we managed to find ourselves, and then trying to get our kids into school. So life started to get normal, but we didn't have any connections to Australia at all. So the only connection I had was with Anglicare, with the job. That was it. We had no friends here. We'd never visited Australia, because we had planned to just do a visit, but COVID changed everything. And 3 years on, best decision we ever made. It's been the most incredible experience, and I kind of look at it as an education. Like, if I could do that, I can do anything. Right? Like, the world is your oyster. I know it's really corny, but it really is. You can do anything. And so I still live by the say yes and figure it all out later. That seems to have served me pretty well in life so far. So let's carry on with that. And family are doing great. So that means that I'm able to do what I do.
What's your thoughts on Adelaide when you first got here? You were like, actually, we've done well here, because you'd never seen it before, right? Like, that's scary.
No, and it was so funny. We would look in the UK when we were living in our house. We would just watch TV, YouTube, of people driving through the city with their camera, right? And you have no idea. Like, that's the only way we knew the city. And then when we came out, we were like, oh, we recognise that. But we were actually here. Yeah,
wow. Is there actually a YouTube of people?
There's people doing trips and things, and so you can get a sense of what it's like.
Nice.
and the buildings and what they look like and the city, and to then actually be here for real, it was just beyond anything. We just couldn't believe our luck. I think what really struck me was it is quiet, but having been in a country where it is incredibly populated, it was lovely. Like, to have space, to actually have social distancing and just space on the beach and just breathe, you know, stand in the sun and breathe. It was amazing. And it's still been like that now for us. We still pinch ourselves. And I say to my husband, we did it.
Yeah.
We did it. We say that so often because it's, you know, Port Noarlunga is probably one of our most favourite places. You go down there and it's the most beautiful place in the world for us. We've travelled the world and so feel pretty confident in saying that, but we live here and it's 40 minutes from where we live. Like, it's a dream.
Well done. And you're, and during that time you became quite the entrepreneur, I understand as well. Is that correct? You and your husband?
Well, I think probably more my husband than me. We, again, thinking about, you know, how long it was taking to get our visas, taking that control again and kind of trying to do something for ourselves. So we did and also, you know, we had 2 kids, so we weren't going out anymore. No. So we decided to do an internet course together and build a business, you know, just as you do. And the opportunity was for us to create something by way of a brand and manufacture. What we ended up doing was roof bags, so camping products, and then shipping to America and selling them in America. And that was basically to give us some seed money to have space to find a job. I didn't know I was going to get a job with Anglicare, and so and equally he didn't know what he wanted to do either. Like, we were quite open to what that could all look like, and so we put all our life savings into this business, and then COVID hit and we were like, oh no one's going to buy it because it was a holiday product essentially. Camping. Yeah.
It's called Wild Explorer.
It is, yes.
XPL.
Yeah. So, and we were nervous. Like, we launched, I think it was June 2019, and then everything happened, and it turns out it was a really great product because the borders shut and no one was going anywhere apart from in their own country. So camping was a great opportunity for people to spend time together. And for us, that means they bought our product. Yeah. And Mark's been working on that ever since. You know, that gives him freedom and flexibility to work the hours that he needs to work to support with the children. It allows for me to do the thing that I'm super passionate about. And I was involved to a point, you know, when it was all the branding and the fancy, you know, the nice stuff. And then it became about numbers, and that's much more up his... Distribution. More up his street, and working with manufacturers in China and things like that. And so that was when I tapped out. I was like, it's over to you, my friend.
And it's doing pretty well?
It's doing very well, yeah. We're going to have a really big year this year. We're hoping for the biggest year that we've had so far. So I think we were sort of 3 months in and we did $100,000 worth of sales, US dollars.
Yeah, wow. So it's doing very well.
So it's doing okay.
Congrats and kudos. I think what I'm really interested in is we've talked a lot about housing, we've talked about the domestic violence piece, but one thing that I really want to explore with you, and it's funny because you and I got to know each other after a piece of work that we did for you guys at Believe Housing, and I remember very, very quickly, very distinctly I should say, Kylie Morton, our head of change and delivery here at SynergyIQ, ringing me after she did a workshop with you or met with you, and she's like, Dan, you got to get Stacey on the show straight up. She's amazing. She's compassionate. She's the best leader I've ever seen, right? Like, and like, firstly, I want to ask you, before we go into your thoughts on leadership, what do you think of the work we did for you? Was it all right?
Do you know what? It was a joy to work with Kylie. Like, we probably have very similar energy levels. Yeah. So it was like bouncing off of someone who kind of got it
Yeah.
in that way. And we did a piece of work around change. So in how you process your own change, right?
Yeah.
So change is inevitable. We're here. This is how it's going to be forever. But what I really wanted to give my team, they're about to go through a really big change with an IT software product,
Yeah.
which is great and great investment. But it is going to be about the engagement of that use, right? Like you buy it, but then people have to use it.
Correct.
So I wanted to bring Kylie in to do a piece of work around how individuals process change for themselves. And so that they had the tools to recognize how they were feeling or what they needed to understand and what questions they could ask to engage with what is absolutely going to happen, which is a new IT software. So Rockstar and Roadie was the program that we undertook. And it was just, it connected with the team beautifully. I've had so many people ask me for the slides and can we see Kylie again? And that was wonderful. So she did it at a portfolio day with my whole team.
There's about 70 odd people in your
Yeah,
team. Yeah. So it's a big
it was
workshop.
a big team. But it resonated with everybody. There was no one in that room that couldn't recognize themselves. So it meant it was relevant to everybody and it was fun.
Yeah.
Like she really brought out the fun in change, right? Like that can be so scary.
It is.
And bring fear. She made it fun and totally digestible for people. And people are still using, my street corner as a term,
Yep.
in their team meetings. It gave people a set of language that was not too that people could use and just lean on to be able to explain how they're feeling without it being negative, right?
Yeah.
Like that people weren't down on change, but they just felt a certain way and to articulate that. So I have nothing but wonderful things to say about SynergyIQ and Kylie in particular, because she delivered so much more than what I expected by way of that connection with my team. And actually, we're going to be using her again very soon with my leadership team. And so we're going to do a bit more work on that because my leaders need to continue to embrace change. And it isn't just going to be IT software for them. It will be other things. It's going to
How do we
continue.
lead people through change? Yeah.
Yeah.
We're onto something with this change thing. I think
So-
we've found a formula that is doing it different to the way most are, which I think is having some really great results. So I really appreciate that. I got a bit of a head wobble over here. Very, very excited about where we're going. So why did you, and this comes back to your leadership qualities, why did you see the need for your team, particularly your wider team? I completely understand your leadership team, but your wider team to embark on their version of change or their understanding of change. Why was that important to you?
Oh, lots of reasons. Yes, the success of the investment is pretty significant for us. Like the dollar value of what we're putting into the IT software is really big.
Yeah.
But you can have the best IT software program and it can still be rubbish in, rubbish out. And so
Correct.
where I need to be with the team is that we've got to use this program to be able to pull out the data to shape the services for our tenants. So there's a real link there, getting back to that tenant. But the piece for me, I guess, is people get scared of change, and IT software is one thing, but we have change all the time, and people tend to fluctuate through that fear and how it makes them feel. And I don't want that. I think we've done so much work around well-being, but actually this is a real practical tool around change to support their well-being, right?
Correct.
So I wanted to make sure that my team had the language that they could use in a safe way, that they could articulate clearly what they needed to make that change work for them, and that we were all in it together. Like we were all able to understand each other's thinking. And actually what that brought was commonality. You know, I think like you do, or I take change like you do.
Yeah.
So you're not alone. We're all in it together.
Yeah.
We all feel.
We're looking at it from the same street corner, right?
Yeah. So it just.
But it also opens up their eyes to way other people, seeing other people's perspectives,
100%.
right?
And
Which
we
is,
all laugh.
yeah.
we were like, oh, that makes so much sense that you think in that way. That totally fills it all in for
Yeah.
me. It connected people.
Correct.
It didn't highlight people, point them out. It made people have a giggle and humanize what change is.
Yeah.
Because, it happens all day long in our lives at work, but it happens all day long in our lives at home too. So, these tools cross over for me.
Yeah, they're not
Yeah.
only in business in how to manage change. It's how do you actually think about change in real life.
And I want people to come to work and enjoy it and be part of that process. So, we've done a huge amount of work around the team culture, and this was another tool to support that culture that I'm saying it's okay, right? As a leader, it's okay that it's a bit scary. Here's some tools.
So to your purpose of creating a world where, secure and safe housing is available to all and for all to be able to flourish from that world, SynergyIQ's purpose is quite similar, right? Where we want people to feel safe and inspired and valued at work.
Yeah.
And, change is a constant, as you said. It's something that is continually happening. And we believe that people aren't being felt valued and inspired because of the way change is done. It's done really poorly.
Yes.
Right? And there's lots of money being spent. There's engagement levels dropping. There's turnover increasing purely because organisations aren't putting the time and effort like you are into developing the capability of your people, but also understanding the way in which people react to change and how do we help them manage and execute through that change as well and set them up for success. And I guess a question to you, and you've seen a lot in your career, why do you think most change programs fail? And what do you think business leaders can do to get this back onto the right track so that people can feel more engaged? So like you said, the culture of the organisation can flourish, that the community and customer gets the benefit of that.
Yeah, I think communication is always the number one, right? Like, you can get it really badly wrong if you don't put yourself in the shoes of your staff and value what they bring. Like my team, I'm so proud of my team, but we are so together because the opportunity that I have had in that team is to hear what they've got to say. So it isn't just about what I want to do. You tell me what your needs are too. And it is about needs, because it could be, you could think, I could think it's something really big, but the reality is it could be something totally easy and doable to do that would make them feel at ease and part of the journey. And I think people will buy into change if they're part of that conversation. Like, don't do two people. Be part of that process. And that's why working with you guys, that was so important, that, the IT software program that we've done, we did 12 months of just engaging with staff to hear what their needs were. That's where you get the gold, the value. And you know what? Showing up, following through every day. Like, if you say you're going to do something, do it. My team, when I first came in, didn't have a lot of trust there for their leaders. And it took a while for me to just keep showing up and keep doing the commitments and showing them, not telling them, showing them what they wanted from me and delivering it for them to trust me. But you've got to put the work in for that. That doesn't just, I don't turn up on a Monday and decide all of a sudden that's how it's going to be. I've had to do 12 months, 2 years worth of work to build on that for my staff. I want my staff to want to come to work. I love doing what I do. I want them to love what they do. And so, sometimes it was simple things. I think, like, we didn't have a coffee machine. So every now and again I'd get a coffee truck in and do some donuts. We'd have half an hour just to connect to each other. The impact of that was enormous. But it's, again, totally doable, doesn't cost a huge amount of money, but the goodwill and the connection that it brings is
What's going back to your roots of the community, right? This is what you're creating.
community. Yeah, your team's our community.
And a culture of belonging.
For sure. Well, believe, belong, become. Right?
Correct.
That's what we say.
Absolutely. There is some statistics going around. There was a survey recently done with a company by the name of SynergyIQ who surveyed over 1,000 board members who had recently fired a CEO.
Oh.
Right, so it's pretty succinct and pretty niche survey. And the number one reason why the CEO was fired, 31%, the number one reason was mismanagement of change. And what's really exciting, I think, from the perspective of what you guys are doing is that you're probably leading in a lot of ways in the way you are managing change, so kudos to you. But I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. Why do you think this is still the case, where people aren't thinking about change and the humans within the business the way in which they should be? And there's still this sort of dictatorship and, like you said, doing change to them as opposed to including them. Why do you think this is? And how do we overcome that?
That's such a difficult question. I control, power.
Yeah.
It can get, for some, pretty heady in that way once you're in that role. But it doesn't create long-lasting outcomes. And I think it's about what your long-term goal is, right? And articulating that to the team. Like, my team know what my purpose is because I talk about it all day long. And it's a vision that I share that they all get on board with.
Yep.
It's so important. If you're not transparent and authentic, people see through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need in our leaders. We need visionaries. We need people who can say, this is where we're going. And that's probably the biggest part of it. If you can articulate where you're going and get your people on board, change and the communication process that comes with that will come with it. But people see through it if you're not genuine. And I think we're certainly post-COVID, people are asking themselves the question a bit more around, what am I doing and why am I doing it? My value, my worth isn't just the dollars at the end of the month. It's I want to contribute more than that. And so I think I've never been about chasing the money. It's always been about the impact, the social impact.
Yeah.
The dollars will come, right? Like I can manage dollars all day long, but if you generate social impact to your business, that gives something for some people to believe in, So that works for commercial and for not-for-profits.
Yeah.
And accessibility of your leadership. I think often hierarchy, I understand why we have it. I'm not a major fan of it. You're human beings. And to lead with compassion for your fellow human being, not a title, is something that I think we're missing. And I think we're starting to see that come through. And that's certainly how I try to lead. But I've never been able to be those people who don't communicate. I'm a people person. So I find it really difficult to answer the question because it's just not my style.
No, which is interesting, which is why I'm trying to get your street corner on this. If you think about hierarchy, which you just said there, so something that popped into my brain as you were talking, it's just a traditional, this is the way the hierarchy is, and everyone's got their own views on it, but ultimately there is always some level of this person's the CEO and this person's frontline. Like it's hard to sort of mold out of that. But how do you create an organisation without that hierarchy? How do you remove yourself and embed yourself within the team when you are the executive general manager of Believe Housing? Like what's your role and thought process in that?
I make sure that I know my team. So I ask about their families. I remember their names. Like it's not complicated.
Yeah.
People like to feel heard. And so I spend a day a week in the Believe office. I'm there to work, but I'm also there to walk the floor and be available. My staff, if they have an issue, they know they can come and speak to me.
Yeah.
Not all of them will, and I understand that position for some might be intimidating. But I'm still that girl who grew up on a council estate.
Yeah.
You know, like.
So you said a day a week though.
Yeah.
What happened to the other 4? Like where are you?
I'm doing things like this, right? I'm out there trying to do other things.
Yeah.
But if I can be there more, obviously,
Yeah.
But when I am,
But you dedicate a minimum of. Yeah, great.
And I ask them how their families are, and just what's going on for them. And sometimes I'll have team members come into my office and say, Stacey, can we talk about housing? Can I ask you about this government announcement?
Yeah.
And I'll sit there and chat.
Yeah.
And it's just simply that. I think it's to be relatable, available, normal.
Yeah.
For want of a better word.
How do you keep evolving as a leader? Like, is it something that you actually put time and effort to?
Yeah, I think you have to constantly learn and be on a path of continuous development. Obviously, there's a professional development.
Yeah.
But I think it's about, like I said, that connection to being an individual and being human. That's really where I try to build my professional capability. So Mel Robbins is probably my number one go-to guru around all things change, and that's because she doesn't just talk about leadership, she talks about you as an individual. And then the 5 a.m. Club was another one that was just a really great story that had such great leadership advice and qualities through it. So my husband's much better at this than me, but I continually try to evolve as an individual, and compassion's probably the thing that I've had to understand more about. Compassionate leadership for your fellow leaders and your staff. And I have an executive mentor as well who works with me through some of that and tells me exactly how it is.
Brilliant. So I am conscious of time. I want to ask a few more questions just around the housing sector, and really more around what does the future look like? I mean, we've got this $100 million investment by the Australian government into the future of housing.
$10 billion, sorry.
$10 billion. $10 billion.
Yeah, I did $100 million within Believe Housing.
Oh, that's right. So it was,
The federal government is $10 billion.
$10 billion.
Yeah.
Excellent. So that's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
To do some good.
Yeah.
How do we make sure that doesn't go to waste?
It's a really good question. I think the government they've made some really great starts, and is a big step forwards in a world where we just haven't had any investment. And I think what this will do is, over the next 5 years, allow for community housing organisations across the nation to build homes that are needed now, but also for the future. The thing that I would like to see is that commitment post 5 years. So what happens after 5 years? Because we know what the need is now. That's not going to go away with the housing that we're going to build over the next 5 years. In fact, some of the targets that they've set for us is we've never delivered it. We've never been able to, not within CHPs, but within the whole country of the building sector. So
is that just because of the availability of trades or
trades, materials? I mean, we've had some major development impacts from COVID-19. 30% development increase of costs. These haven't just gone away.
No.
They're levelling off, and things are starting to free up again. But we're going to deliver all these great outcomes over 5 years, and then what? Right, we need to start.
Population's still growing.
Population's still growing. The economy's still growing. We hear that a lot. We're doing great in South Australia. We're bringing people in. Where are they going to live?
Cost of living's going up.
It's where are they going to live? So if we are really serious about providing housing, and we're talking 10,000 homes as the target for affordable housing over 5 years, and 20,000 for social, it's not a huge amount. over the whole.
And that'll
industry.
meet our population and demands, you're thinking?
That's
or
not going to meet the demands.
No. So what will meet the demands, do you know?
That's a good question.
No.
No, I don't. I haven't done that piece of work, but I think that's where we're at the moment. Like this is a great start, and I don't want that conversation to stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like 5 years' time, it isn't going to stop. So what's next?
Yeah.
So what does, I don't know, the next 20 years look like? Because if you map that with the economic aspirations, what housing do we need?
Yeah.
And the state government have, they're doing a huge amount of work around generating and bringing more housing into this state, which is commendable and very exciting, I think, for South Australia to grow in such a way I don't think we've ever seen. So I'm super excited about it, and I just think there's plenty of opportunity, but I just don't want that conversation to go by way of, well, we've given you that money.
Yeah.
That's enough. It's not enough.
I don't see how it can go away, though, can it? It just seems logical that this is something that we're going to continually have to grapple with as population grows. And, we've got an aging demographic as well. So are you excited about the future?
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I think it's just such an opportunity for us to create lasting communities and build more homes for people and give them the stability to pivot their lives. And it does excite me, and I will never stop being that kid.
But so I'll just cast my thoughts back to the UK, where you said there's these 15 odd companies with 100,000 homes. Is there a model in which this can become profitable, in that the sense that companies can do something like that? I don't know.
They're pretty profitable over there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, is that model something that could work here?
It could, but they have a certain amount of government funding that associates with it. So we charge our rents in a very different way.
Yeah, okay.
So there are lots of differences. I think what the HAF brings is a completely different opportunity. The affordable housing space is something that's been untapped in a lot of respects. And I think the opportunity to build really good quality homes and make sure that people have places to live is so important. Like, vacancy rate in Adelaide at the moment is 0.5%. Like, it's the lowest it's been. We at Mansfield Park, we did an open last week. We had 40 people queuing up down the road just to register to go and have a look. It's just unbelievable. And that's people, working at the end of the day. Like, they're working, finish work, come and look for a house. So until we can change the vacancy rate and plough some supply into the community, this isn't going to change for a while. The money that we're going to get with HAF isn't going to start being rolled out. The opening round for applications at the moment closes on the 22nd of March, and awards will be new financial year. So from that point, you've got a good 18 months before you've got keys in the door. Yeah. So we need to really be a bit measured with some of this. It's not going to be an immediate fix.
No, it takes time to build it.
It's going to take a lot of time.
And they need to build to code and everything as well, right?
Yeah.
It can't just be cardboard boxes. I think that 0.5 that you just said, percent vacancy rate, that essentially what that's saying is that all the rentals are taken, which means that drives demand, which drives pricing up and everything else that comes with that. How does it get back to 2 to 3%? Like, what does that number look like?
Supply. It is supply, purely.
But I'm a numbers guy, right? Like, we're going to build 10,000 homes. Yeah. Does that then take it? No. This is just this is a problem that we can't solve, in the immediate future.
I think there are things that we could do. I do think there are things that we could do. So
can we just build up?
There are different challenges that come with that, I would say, and just remember those people who were in lockdown during COVID in Melbourne. That caused other issues. So I think it's about making sure that we incentivise investors and developers to encourage them to build in social and affordable housing. I think that it's an opportunity for us to consider other models. So it isn't just about rentals. There's build to rent, there's, home start to buy your own home. Supply is going to drive costs down, like the price of things down. So we have to bring more supply in. But like I said earlier, this has taken years to get to this point. It's going to take a while to get into a direction of starting to feel better.
Yeah, see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. So, I think the Residential Tenancies Act that the state government has just amended is a really great start. And it's great to see that they really collaborated with the industry to work through what that could look like. But it is, the low-income earners are the most marginalised out of this situation because we're all in competition for the same rentals. And so supply and demand, it's very challenging.
Hard to get, yeah. Is there anything like the general community, like the average Joe, can they do anything to help? Or is it kind of outside of their hands?
I think it's the conversation. I think the fact that we're seeing people who are working for the first time experience homelessness.
Yeah.
That's the conversation that we need
That's
to have.
scary.
We need to hear more of those stories. I think those most vulnerable will always be or will need support. But I think we need to, this is a standard of, as a society, of a fairly rich country. Should we be accepting that we are in a state where we have significant homelessness and children living in bed and breakfasts and hotels? Is that what we want as a nation? Is that what we're proud of? We need to be talking about those stories more, and they are becoming more and more frequent. Mums living in cars with their kids, making sure that their kids have food and they don't eat. This is not like dreaming. This is not fake stories. These are real. This is happening. And we, as a state and as a community, don't have to accept this and should be asking more of our politicians around what they're going to do. So if you want to do something, obviously there's always the fundraising opportunities that come with the sort of work that we do, for sure.
Yep.
But speaking to your representatives and demanding answers from them is really important. We need to hear less about the stories in the press around the odd person who lives in social housing that has the police there that day, and more about the humanity of people living in cars and feeding their kids and going to work hungry. That's happening more and more, and so I would just ask people to kind of give that some consideration. Is that the world that you want your kids to grow up in? And it's certainly not the world I want my kids to grow up in. So I ask more and I expect more.
Yep.
And I think we should as a community.
I agree. To you, one last question before we jump into some quick fire questions to round off. What's one thing that you want everyone to know about the social and community housing world that you think might not be common knowledge to all?
That's a really good question. That's actually quite a hard question. Look, I think never think that you're beyond accessing that or having a need to access that. You might go about your business today and in a blink of an eye you might be vulnerable, or classes have a vulnerability or a disability, or something could happen. And it could be you. It could be your family. So don't think that it's not you. Think about who it could be, and it could be you, and how would you want to experience that cohort of housing and those people who support and work with you. I would like people to just start to think about, this could absolutely be you as an individual. You could sort of experience domestic violence, you could experience disabilities or mental health breakdowns or job loss, or your home, interest rates are rising, you could lose your home. Like, don't ever think it's someone else's problem.
Yeah.
It is all of our issue that we all need to consider, and as a nation really decide if this is the legacy that we want to leave behind for our kids.
Well done. I think the one thing that I learnt from you today, which I think, even just obviously there's this, don't believe it can't be you. But the one thing that sort of stuck with me was more around understanding the context behind the person who's in that position as well. Like, there's this judgment that can be brought up, but you don't actually know until you've walked a mile in their shoes.
100%.
Yeah, which is great. So thank you. Rightio, so some quick fire questions. Now, I didn't prep you with these ones, so my apologies for that. Normally I might drop in a few here to get you on so these are really going to be all off the cuff. So what are you reading right now?
Handmaid's Tale.
The Handmaid's Tale.
Handmaid's Tale. Yes.
Dystopian.
A bit scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't read that. I've heard so many good things. I haven't watched a TV show
Me
either.
neither.
What's one self-development book that you feel that stands out from the crowd? So you named a few before.
Yeah. So what was the one? 5 Second Rule with Mel Robbins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Your favourite?
My favourite.
What's one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think that certainly from leadership, we're all human beings and we all have needs. And so just put yourself in their shoes. Just strip it back and see from their eyes what they're experiencing. And so that the behaviours that come your way might not really be about you. It's actually about them. So lead with compassion. That's probably the biggest learning that I've had. Lead with compassion for sure.
Yeah. Someone once said to me, and it really stuck with me, which is, like, you could get frustrated with people, especially like in leadership role, you get frustrated with people. Why are they not doing it? Why? Yeah. But if you ask yourself the question, are they trying their best with what they've got? Right? It's really hard to be frustrated with someone.
Yeah.
If the answer is yes.
Yeah. And often the intentions are good, right?
Correct.
Like, it's really, when you start to think about it, you're like, they're here for the right reason. They're just not doing it the way I want them to do it, or when I want them to do it. And I think once you start to unpack that, it just takes all the heat out of it. It's not about you. Like, don't be personal. It's not personal. You make things personal for yourself. Think about the other person.
Yeah. If you could have coffee with one current or historical figure?
Freddie Mercury.
Freddie Mercury,
Yeah.
Superstar.
Yeah.
I named my dog Freddie.
My dog is called Freddie too.
Yes. We've got a dog named Freddie. We've got our children named Isla, and we live in the same suburb.
We do.
What is going on here? Why Freddie? Just out of curiosity.
Freddie Mercury.
Yeah, but why Freddie? Why would you have coffee with him?
Because he was such a trailblazer. Like, his era, what he did, his character, his persona on stage, like, he lived. And I would just like to understand a little bit more around his learning, and like, what a great person to sit and have coffee with, right? Like,
yeah. He'd call you darling for no. What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
It's not about you.
Yeah.
Not that important.
Yeah.
Like, just
the world doesn't revolve around you.
Just like totally takes the wind out of your sails. In as much as, like, take a minute, just take a breath. And my exec mentor, actually, she said it, and I could hear it from her probably. It was something that she was able to say, and I was able to receive in a way that wasn't offensive, you know, right? Like, it isn't about me. Nothing is. The only thing that I can control and influence is how I respond. And it's been great advice for me.
I have so many thoughts on that, but we could have a conversation around that because I think, in essence, we're floating in the middle of space on a pale blue dot, right?
Yep.
And it all kind of doesn't really matter. And
It doesn't.
I think about death a lot. I know that sounds pretty morbid, but once we're gone, is anyone really going to remember that? The fight that we had, or the way in which we wanted the colour to be so. Like, do you know what I mean?
I'm damn well hoping they will remember me.
Yeah, no, they'll remember you. But I think the reality is, time will reduce the impact of what.
But if we set ourselves up now,
Correct.
There's that legacy.
Yeah, 100%. So anyway, that's a whole nother rabbit hole. What's one habit that holds you back the most?
Socials and internet and just in the evening, the mindless scrolling.
Yeah.
It's so bad. I need to stop.
It's like a poking machine.
It's not good.
What's one thing that pisses you off the most?
Only one?
Yeah, I know.
My kid's not putting the clean laundry away. I mean, it isn't any more frustrating than that.
No.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
My wife often has the same argument with the kids. If you could pay someone to do one of your chores, what would it be?
Clean the bathrooms.
Clean the bathrooms.
Can't bear it.
Not good. What's one word you absolutely hate?
Oh, I've never heard of that one. I actually don't know.
Like pivot?
No, pivot's fine. I quite like pivot at the minute.
What else? What other ones we had? Robust was another one that we had.
Yeah, I don't know.
Not sure.
That's a really difficult question.
It is. It's a tough one, but I like it because there's a lot of words floating around that get overused.
Yeah, they do. But I would definitely have needed more time to consider.
What's the first thing you would do if you became invisible?
I'd go into my kids' classrooms.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I would.
That's cool.
I would just want to see and be a
How
quiet
they
observer and see them interact. Like, I feel like it's a space you don't get to ever go to.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'd just like to sit and watch them for a day.
What would you do armed with that knowledge after then? Because you're supposed to be invisible, right? So you're not.
You couldn't do anything with it, right?
Well, I mean, would you coach them? Go, hey, I saw you had this conversation, but then how would you know?
Exactly, but I guess it would be. It's an education, right?
Yeah.
So how I don't know what that. It might be that they might be perfect, right?
Yeah.
Or it might be that I'm super proud of their characters,
Yeah.
and I would see a side to them that I don't see, and that. I don't want to say what I would do with that.
No,
because I don't know what.
No, that's right. This is a loaded question. That would help answer. When you get in the car, how was your day? Good.
Yeah. What did you learn?
Yeah.
Can't remember.
Yeah. Okay. So it might give you some insight as to what's actually going on. So, what's the most useless talent you have?
I don't really have a talent. I don't. Think.
Useless talent.
Cleaning up.
That's actually useful.
Filling the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Quick.
Right. My favorite question of the whole podcast: what's your best dad, mum, stupid joke?
All right. So we this is a thing in our house. So we do a lot of these jokes, and I'm not very good at remembering them, but I do like this one. What did the baby corn say to the mama corn?
What did the baby corn say to the mama corn?
Where's popcorn? That's so cute.
That's horrible. It is cute. Very, very good. Thank you so much for your time today, Stacey, and thank you for everything that you are doing and going to continue to do for the I guess the housing sector and the community of South Australia, and for those who are all in need of housing and putting a roof over your head. I think there is a lot to learn from your journey, and I take it back to the start of this conversation where you said, I was just grateful to have a roof over my head and have my own bedroom, and that stability allowed me to be where I am today. And it's not often that we hear perspectives like that and street corners like that. So I just wanted to say thank you on behalf, and thank you for all that you're doing. Thank you for the great leadership that you're showing to you and your team, which is ultimately having a great benefit on the community, and keep being you.
Oh, it's an honour. Truthfully, it really is.
Perfect. That's it for us, guys. Thank you. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you, and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.